Weekday, 8:41 a.m. You're at the kitchen table, your laptop's open. You're already in the first meeting when Teams flashes up. Quick call, then a message pops up. Can you just take this? Then the classic closer. Just prioritise. And nothing feels big. It's not a new project. It's not a promotion. It's just more. What makes it heavy isn't the tasks you can see. It's the work that sits in between them. The chasing, the aligning, the covering, the keeping an eye on it. The invisible coordination that follows you around like background noise. This is the part people misname as I'm disorganised or I can't handle it. But it's usually not a time management problem. It's responsibility drift. Same job, wider load. And once you can see the structure, the feeling of having a lot on stops being mysterious. Once you have a name for it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. It shows up as little additions that never arrive as new work, they arrive as maintenance, as a favour, as a quick check, as just covering this once. Have you noticed how your day can be full before you've done anything that you'd call your work? You open the laptop and the first hour disappears into aligning, clarifying, locating the right person, forwarding context, confirming what was agreed, rewriting the same message 3 different ways so 3 different people will read it. None of that looks like a big task. It's just the day ahead, and that's why it feels heavier without being legible. Because the load that expanded is not always the visible workload. It's the coordination load, the invisible work that sits between tasks and makes everything feel like you've got a lot on. Here's the pattern in its most ordinary form. Someone pings on Teams. Quick call. You join. It's not a decision meeting. It's not even a problem. It's a handover of ambiguity. After the call, you have 3 new responsibilities, but none of them were spoken as responsibilities. One is to remember what was said. One is to make sure that the right people know it. And one is to notice later if it doesn't happen. That last one is the silent one, the keeping an eye on it job. Unpaid cognition, work that lives in your head. Have you noticed how often you become the person who holds the thread? Not because you asked for it, because you were present, because you replied quickly, because you're competent, because you don't want it to drop, so you absorb it. And then when you're overloaded, the advice arrives as a sentence that doesn't match reality. Just prioritise. Prioritise what exactly? The tasks you can see or the obligations you can't? Because the invisible ones don't show up as items. They show up as risk. If you don't do them, something later breaks, and you're the person who saw it coming. That's why the day feels crowded, even when the task list looks reasonable. The pressure is not only how much, it's how many open loops. A small number of tasks with closure feels light. A moderate number of tasks with 10 open threads feels heavy. Same hours, different psychological weight. Most people interpret this as a personal flaw. I'm bad at focus. I'm disorganised. I can't manage my time. I need better boundaries. And the reason those expectations stick is simple. They're the only explanations that are available at the point of pain. You can see yourself. You can't see the structure. So you try the solutions that fit the story. You colour code the calendar. You make a new system. You watch 2 videos about productivity. You promise you'll stop saying yes. You tell yourself you'll be firmer. Then Monday arrives and the same thing happens. Because you are not primarily fighting your own habits. You are responding to a form of work that is designed to expand sideways. A boundary is not a strategy if the consequence of the boundary is that the system drops onto you anyway, because the system already knows you are the reliable one, and that's the quiet trap. You don't get assigned responsibility through formal promotion. You get it through informal reliance. And informal reliance doesn't come with a job title change. It comes with a sentence that sounds harmless. Can you just? It's rarely malicious, it's rarely dramatic. It's usually practical, but it has a structural effect. It transfers load, and then, because it was just, it's treated as costless. This is the moment many people misread as weakness. They think they're struggling with ordinary work. They're not. They're struggling with work expansion that doesn't fit. So, what is actually happening? Responsibility drift is what you get when a system is built around speed, responsiveness, and ambiguity. In most modern teams, the limiting factor is not effort, it's coordination. Work is split across people who don't share a full picture. Priorities shift, ownership blurs, tools make messaging frictionless, so the system evolves a solution. Not an official one, a behavioural one. Responsibility moves towards whoever reduces friction. The person who replies, the person who remembers, the person who knows where the document is, the person who can translate between 2 teams, the person who can explain the same context without sounding annoyed. That's the person that becomes an informal hub, and hubs take heat. The key detail is this: the work that expands is often not the core work, it's the glue, the follow-ups, the clarifications, the "are we still doing this" messages, the "who's actually owning this" moments, the second order tasks created by someone else's uncertainty. This is why quick calls are rarely quick. A quick call is often a request for you to carry ambiguity so someone else can move on. You leave the call with the mental residue. They leave with relief. That's not because they're bad people, it's because the system rewards forward motion and punishes delay. And ambiguity is delay, so ambiguity gets offloaded to the person most willing to hold it. You thought your workload increased because you were given more to do, but often your workload increased because you became the place where other people's work stops being unclear. You became the buffer. Then comes the second layer, the advice. Just prioritise. This assumes tasks are discrete. But coordination work is not discrete, it's elastic. It stretches into every gap. If you have 5 minutes, you answer a message. If you have 10 minutes, you join a call. If you have 30 minutes, you fix a misunderstanding before it becomes a fire. It doesn't look like work that can be scheduled. It looks like work that appears. This is what makes it feel like you're never finished, because you're not finishing tasks, you're managing flow. And flow doesn't end, it only quietens. Your job didn't become harder, it became wider. Same job title, wider load. Now, the psychological part. Responsibility drift is not only a workload issue, it's an identity issue. Because once you become the hub, you start performing hub behaviour automatically. You monitor, you anticipate, you preempt, you keep checking, not because you love control, because you've learned quietly that things fall apart when you don't. So you become the person who catches things before they drop. And then the system starts treating that as normal. You get praised for being on it. You get trusted. You get included. You get relied on, but you don't get relieved. So the brain does what it always does in modern pressure. It moralizes. It turns load into character. If you're struggling, you assume you're failing. If you're tired, you assume you're weak. If you can't switch off, you assume you have a discipline problem. But what you actually have is constant readiness, a background process, work that follows you home, because the work is not only tasks, it's vigilance. You can be on the sofa and still be holding 3 open loops from the day. Did they reply? Did that decision get documented? Did the quick call create a new expectation you haven't named yet? This is why the pressure often feels like fog rather than pain. If it were obviously too much, you could object to it, but it doesn't arrive as too much. It arrives as just, and just is hard to refuse without feeling petty. So you carry it, and then you blame yourself for carrying it. That's the internalization. It feels personal. It's patterned. Sometimes the heaviest part of the job is not the work, it's the sense that you should be coping better. When the structure is invisible, your only available explanation is yourself. So you turn the pressure inward. The resolution here is not a productivity plan, it's a lens. Because when you can see responsibility drift, you stop treating the feeling of a lot on as mysterious personal weakness. You start asking a different question. Not why am I struggling, but what expanded? And often the answer is specific. It's not that you got slower, it's that you became a coordination surface. You became the person who absorbs the handoffs, the person who holds context across calls, the person who prevents friction, the person who keeps the system moving. That is real work, even when nobody calls it work. So here's the simplest reframe that tends to stabilize people. If your job feels heavier without a promotion, it may be because you're doing more unseen work than before. Not because you're failing, because responsibility drift is designed to look like just helping. Once you notice it, you also notice the exact phrases that create it. Quick call, can you just prioritise. These phrases are not insults, they are signals. They tell you where the system is leaking ambiguity. They tell you where ownership is unclear. They tell you where coordination is being offloaded onto the most responsive person in the room. And the point is not to become suspicious of colleagues. The point is to become literate in the structure, because literacy reduces shame. If you've been living with the sense that the day is inexplicably heavy and you can't justify why, this is often why. Nothing suddenly became unbearable. It expanded sideways. And once you can see the sideways expansion, you can finally describe the load you've been carrying without it turning into a story about your character. That's the shift. Not I'm not coping, but I'm doing invisible coordination and it accumulates. Calm, clear, accurate.